welcome to Jesus in Focus 17. I'm Christopher John Joseph in Melbourne, Australia, a non-denominational follower of Jesus of Nazareth, born into the Catholic faith back in the late 1950s. By the time I was 17, I was a non-denominational follower of Jesus, and I was very interested at that time as I was a young adult, teenager, in all sort of spiritual teachings. Buddha and Jesus were the two greatest I found. Buddha, of course, being singular in his love towards everyone, non-violent, pacifist. And Jesus, of course, was originally also, like Buddha, a teacher of pacifism. We must be pacifists. Now, I left the church, Catholic Church, and the churches have been in decline ever since that time, the 70s. In Australia, they're really shutting down the Christian churches. Not many young people interested in Jesus anymore. And I had to investigate this recently after my mother passed on and my sister passed on, so my family duties were sort of finished. And I wanted to hear how other churches were talking about Jesus and the divine loving creator. To my shock and horror, they were Jewish. They were constantly talking about the Old Testament God, the two-headed God of the Jews. And I couldn't comprehend what had gone wrong. So I investigated it, and sure enough, the historical simplicity is this, that for the first 312 years, all followers of Jesus, Christians, were not Jewish Christians, they were Christians, they were pacifists. Now, Constantine, his mother was interested in Jesus and this God of Jesus, because they were told, oh, there's just this one God this Jesus guy follows. And of course the Romans had multiple gods, god of war, Mars, etc., and another god, wine, Bacchus, pleasure, Venus, God, love, different Greece. They all had different gods for different aspects of human nature. Constantine goes to war in 312 AD with his rival to see who becomes emperor of Rome. The story goes he saw a sign in the sky that represented the name of Jesus. He got his soldiers to paint it on their shields. He goes to war. He wins the battle. He kills in the name of Jesus with Jesus on the shields, and he becomes emperor of Rome. So within a year he disbands all Roman gods, and he says, look, we'll give this Jesus guy and his God a run now. They're the only religion in the Roman Empire. And so suddenly it was like, wow. Up until then, Christians were thrown to the lions, murdered, raped, just brutalized. And not only by the Romans, but by the Jews. Paul himself, St. Paul, was a persecutor of Christians. And suddenly they became the only football team on the ladder. So it was quite a shock. But then the problem arose, well, what about the army, the Roman army? If the emperor's a Christian now, Jesus is the only sort of spiritual guy with his God that we're going to follow, then there was a problem with the Roman army, who still would go to fight wars with Constantine and kill. How could they be Christian? Because you can't do that. And basically within a year, the church leaders caved in. They were corrupted by Constantine and corrupted within themselves, to the point where they eventually said, well, look, yeah, okay, soldiers can go and be Christians, go to war and kill the enemy. So in other words, those church leaders around 312, 320 AD, etc., they actually converted all Christians back into being Jewish. It's quite stunning that that happened. And that is still going on today. Judeo-Christian churches, the Judeo-Christian Catholic faith, the Judeo-Christian Church of England, the Judeo-Christian Pentecostals, Seventh-day Adventists, Mormons, Jehovah's, Judeo-Christian, Jewish Christian. It's a massive, massive mistake, perversion, distortion, and poisoning of everything Jesus stood for and did. He gave up his life to get the Jews out of their dualistic, perverted understanding of God, and that's what it is, and was, and still is, into the singularity of divine love. Now, the Jews worship a two-headed God with one body called Yahweh. That's where the confusion is. Oh, there's only one God. Sure, there's one body, but it's got two heads. Godhead of war, thieving, murdering, revengeful, lying God. They worship that God. They love their war God. They love killing in the name of their war God, as everyone did in those days. And they got a Godhead of love. Jesus cuts the warhead off, realizes the perversion of their own religion, his own religion, and he tries to lead them out. And of course they kill him. They kill him because they love the war God. That's why they kill him. They want to hang on to it. And then unfortunately Constantine destroyed his pacifist message and destroyed Christianity to a big extent. Judeo-Christians go to war all over the place, all the time. You've still got the Quakers, the Amish, Syrian Christians, I think, Mennonites. There are a few groups of pacifist Christians left in the world, very small minority. Just as there are only a small minority of Jewish pacifists in the world, very small minority. Anyone who's in this pacifist divine love pathway, they're on the way to heaven. Everyone else is probably in the dualistic road to hell. So, and it's just because you're full of darkness. You're hurting and killing and loving. Make up your mind, Do you want to go to hell and suffer, or do you want to go to heaven and be full of love? It's one or the other. So that's the Gospels of Jesus Unplugged, available around the world online now. So I had to then, of course, that's jcinfocus@gmail.com. If you want to contact me at all. I'd love to start a new Christian community of just Christians, where we don't study the Jewish religion much at all, any more than any other religion. And we certainly do not believe that the two-headed God of the Jews is the God of Jesus. This is the distinctive thing between a true Christian and a Jewish Christian. Jewish Christians are worshipping two different religions and two different gods. I'm not one of those. I get a little bit angry at times, upset. So I had to start writing the teachings of Jesus Unplugged. So this is where I now move into just his words, rather than the translation of the Gospels, which have a bit of a storyline and various other things in it. The Gospels is fairly traditional, although it's much more modern in its language and more universal. The ones that I've written, that is. This one's about the teachings. Now, I'm unfortunately suffering from a fungal infection in the lung, which is neurotoxic to the brain. So I'm not sure how long I've got to try to write this book. So it's very difficult. I can only write every few days now because of the pain I'm in. But I've tried to start writing, and I thought, well, because I could die any day now, I better at least put this online. So here it is. Chapter 1 of the teachings of Jesus Unplugged. Jesus' view of our life on earth. What did Jesus really teach about our life on earth in a biological, dualistic, temporary body of flesh made from the material earth elements, such as water, gases and earthly foods, and empowered by the intricate interaction of all these different elements and body parts, which eventually ends in death? He taught that we all have another hidden body within us, which is eternal, totally spiritual in nature and singular in its identity, empowered not by temporary, finite earthly elements, but only by a loving spiritual life force from an eternal divine spiritual creator in a heavenly spiritual world of perfect love. This is the treasure hidden in the field of our earthly bodies that he spoke of, and which our loving creator offers to all human children to bring us out of this material world of suffering into a world of spiritual love. Our earthly bodies are awake in this material world from the moment we are born, absorbing and learning from all the experiences and physical sensations that we undergo as we grow physically. And all the accompanying emotional states and feelings are also born out of our physical experiences and interactions with other children and the material world at large. These can equally produce, from the same experience, complete opposite reactions depending on the individual child. This is due to being born into a material world in a dualistic body of flesh that is capable of generating opposite thoughts and actions depending on how each individual views the same situation. We're in a dangerous situation. You're in a dualistic body. I've got to warn you. Be careful. The spiritual body is singular. That's what we've got to get into. This also includes being shaped by the influence of the cultural and family traditions, social living conditions, and the collective way of thinking already established in the community we are born into. Despite being affected by all of these varying experiences and influences, we must establish a stable and strong identity to make our way through such a diverse world of opposites. But this is a world full of traps, dangers, and children who have become beasts of the flesh, causing suffering to others instead of healing suffering. Of course, the wars in the Northern Hemisphere are beasts of the flesh, satanic children. Jesus gives us another way to establish and stabilize our true identity that enables us to view this dualistic world through a singular spiritual mind of love. He states this when he said, "If your eye or mind is single, your whole body will be full of light. But if you are divided within yourself, you will be filled with darkness." This alters the way we see everything, and so alters our reactions to any situation. Instead of being divided within ourselves between love and hate, we are wholly empowered only by love. This can only be established and fully experienced by realizing we are all spiritual children of our divine loving spiritual creator in the heavenly spiritual world. As Jesus taught, be in this world but not of it anymore. Now that doesn't mean that everyone's awake to this. It just means that the potential is the same in everyone, and that's true. He awakens us to our true spiritual identity. The word Buddha means awakened one. Jesus was definitely awakened. He awakens us to our true spiritual identity, which is not material and finite, but is eternal and formed from the spiritual life force of our divine loving creator. As he taught, flesh gives birth to flesh, spirit gives birth to spirit. Marvel not that I tell you, you must be born again from above. He also taught, do not fear those who can kill your body of flesh, but only fear sin. They can lead your spirit and soul into outer darkness, separating you from your divine loving creator, her light, love, spiritual life force, and heaven. That's the thing to fear, generally called hell. All those people in the Northern Hemisphere are murdering each other. That's unfortunately where they're heading at the moment. They don't even know. They don't believe. Every child will shake the hand of suffering to varying degrees at some time during their temporary life here on earth. That's a fact. Some soon after birth, through to those who finally meet it in old age. But not every child gets to shake the hand of love, and some only for a short while. Yet in every child is a spiritual identity and spiritual body and mind of love, connected to a never-ending divine source of love. And this is the thing. We have to turn, as I say, turn to the divine loving creator for our ultimate help, you might say, ultimate identity to establish ourselves. Heaven can see us, but here on earth we might be alone or think we're alone. This spiritual body is not automatically awakened like our body of flesh. It needs to be activated by having your attention drawn to its existence by someone who already knows it is there. Then they instruct us in how to find it within ourselves, become at one with it, and live out of it. This is normally the responsibility of our earthly parents, but current times are destroying the spiritual connections with the divine spiritual creator in the heavenly spiritual world, and children are no longer being connected in this way. So we must turn to great spiritual teachers like Jesus who can do this for us. In Australia, Christian churches are emptying, shutting down. Almost no young people going. In my street, there's a little church that we went to, and the family when I was a child, and it had 2 services with probably around 400 people there every Sunday. And now there's 1 service a month with about 25 people. And that's right across the board here in Australia. Christianity is dying in Australia, and it's because they're teaching 2 different religions. Plus young people have turned away from spirituality as well, to a big degree. So Jesus was guided from above until his true spiritual identity was revealed to him by finding our one true divine loving spiritual creator. He then realized he had 2 different bodies in one. His body of flesh created through the union of his earthly parents, and his spiritual body created through his union with our divine loving spiritual creator, to be born again as a spiritual child of heaven on earth. He then knew without any doubt this potential is within every child on earth if we all just search for it. And now that he understood the way to find it, he began to teach it to all other children to free them from their suffering and lead them to the heavenly spiritual world, and at the same time increasing the presence of the divine love of our loving creator in this world, through them also being transformed by understanding, following and practicing his spiritual teachings and way of love. If you become a spiritual child of love, you're only going to benefit the world. You're not a problem. You're not going to join the armies and go to war. That's over for you. So this is the problem. Children aren't being awoken to their spiritual nature of love much anymore. And we have to try to keep this alive and revive it if we can. This is the focus of all of the spiritual teachings of Jesus. As he said, my words, they are spirit and they are life. They awaken us to our true spiritual identity as spiritual children of the divine loving creator and bring our spirits alive by becoming at one with the loving life force from heaven that gives us spiritual life. This helps us to stay spiritually safe while we navigate our way through this material world while encountering many various challenges, some so dangerous they could undermine and destroy our spiritual life. But his words keep us firmly on the path to heaven. This heavenly spiritual life force will also sustain our spiritual soul and body through the last worldly experience we have to pass through, the death of our temporary body of flesh. This is how we are connected to the heavenly spiritual world from within ourselves, for the loving spiritual life force that sustains our soul and spiritual body comes from heaven, not the earth. This is the living, eternal spiritual body that Jesus spoke of, that we need to become at one with and consolidate while here on earth by manifesting the spiritual love in us through our physical actions and words. This is what he meant when he said that those who understand his words and are born into the Spirit will not die. Only the flesh dies. Without our spiritual identity becoming our primary identity while here on earth, we may be unable to easily enter the heavenly spiritual world of the divine loving spiritual creator. It's going to be hard rocking up to heaven's gates with a tank, a gun and a drone and a bomb in your hand. Say, can I come into heaven? I've just been busy killing, these people in Gaza or Palestine or or in Russia or Ukraine. Can I come into heaven? I've got all these guns with me. I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? Those children they're almost like insane. What can you do? We just pray that they drop their guns and go home, love their families. That's all we can try to pray for them. That's all. They're all on their way to hell at the moment, aren't they? It's not a nice thing. So not easy to enter the heavenly spiritual world of the divine loving creator if you're busy killing children here on earth of the divine loving creator. Obviously those children can't enter heaven, so they won't be there. So even if they kill us here, they won't be there. They'll be somewhere else. According to Jesus, this is the purpose of our life on earth, to be born again into the Spirit while still in the flesh, and bring as much heavenly spiritual love as we can to other children in need in whatever way they may require it. We do this without any judgment. We become selfless children of the divine loving creator, caring for all the children in need in this dangerous dualistic material world. We become children of light in the darkness of this world as Jesus taught us to be, and help bring those dead to the Spirit back to life. Then at the end of our journey here on earth, when our two bodies separate, we'll enter the heavenly spiritual world of love, hopefully, beyond all suffering, and be in the presence of our divine loving creator, whose beauty, kindness and love is beyond all words. When Jesus said to the disciples, go out and heal the sick and raise the dead, the words really mean, and bring those dead to the Spirit back to life. He wasn't telling them to go out and if someone's just died, bring them back to life again. I mean, a 94-year-old just dies, I'll bring them back to life again. They might live another day or two. It wasn't about that. He was saying about bringing them back to life, to the Spirit, because the Spirit is true life, not the flesh. So raise the dead really means bring those dead to the Spirit, back to life of the Spirit. That's what his whole message is about, and that's what he taught the disciples to do. It's been sort of not well translated. So that's my general dialogue there for the first chapter. I'll move on to the second, the divine loving spiritual creator. I'll just quickly read through this. Jesus had a singular understanding and experience of who the divine spiritual creator really is. The divine one was not the God of the Jews, which was a two-headed dualistic God, a godhead of war with a godhead of love on one body called Yahweh. The divine loving spiritual creator that Jesus was at one with and teaches us about is only one and divine love. The divine one is beyond all mortal gender and can be addressed either as he or she, depending on the spiritual tradition. The Jewish religion was based on a patriarchal culture, so their pronoun for God became he and the Father, which Jesus naturally used to teach the Jewish children. I prefer the pronoun she, as it is our earthly mothers who give birth to our biological bodies, so it is reasonable to also call our divine spiritual creator she, as she gives birth to my spiritual body and life. Also, in this earthly world, it seems a common satanic sickness that mostly males start wars, not females. So to align the divine with females is quite in accordance with the more spiritual and intelligent gender on earth. Rock 8, Vladimir. Jesus had a new understanding of the divine loving creator that the Jews did not have. He clearly listened to the good prophets and possibly read all through the Jewish scriptures, and guided by the Holy Spirit of the divine, he discovered there were two different gods in amongst the Jewish religion going by the one name, Yahweh. He discovered the delusion, the poison. Like someone panning for gold in a stream of words, Jesus found all the gold nuggets of truth and divine love amongst the other words that were dark and evil, belonging to a war god. He discarded the dark evil words that were counter-forces to the divine loving Creator and joined all the gold nuggets together to form a single disc of pure gold and love. This was his moment of enlightenment and a massive personal awakening and breakthrough, releasing him from the confusion and delusion of the Jewish religious belief in a two-headed God. He was then awakened to his true spiritual identity and was reborn in spirit, and became a universal spiritual child of the one true divine loving spiritual Creator in the heavenly spiritual world. He then realized this potential is in all of us if we only knew how to find it. He spent the rest of his life teaching us how well to do this. Two different gods. Jesus gave a very clear warning to all his followers about the two different gods of the Jews and the one true loving Creator that Jesus was at one with. Nearly every single Judeo-Christian church in the world today ignores his warning and teaches that the two-headed God of the Jews is the same as the one divine loving Creator of Jesus. This is a lie, or at best a very serious misunderstanding, which can take followers of Jesus away from the one true spiritual Creator. Christians today who have taken no notice of this very important warning need to read the following found in 4 of the 5 Gospels in Matthew, Luke, Mark, and the Gospel of Thomas. You can see the verses there in chapters if you want to look them up, but they all say the same sort of thing. But this teaching to be in 4 of the 5 Gospels shows how important this warning was to the early writers about the new understanding of the Divine One that Jesus gave the world, and this is essentially what they all say. Jesus then said, "A man should never put new wine into an old wineskin. If he does, the new wine will burst the wineskins, and the new wine will be lost, and the old wineskins destroyed. New wine must be put into new wineskins, and no man used to drinking old wine desires new wine, for he only knows the taste of the old wine, and believes it is good enough, and through arrogance he rejects the new wine without even tasting it. No one tears a piece of cloth from a new garment and sews it onto an old garment. If he does, the patch will not match the old, and it will lift away from it, the new from the old, and a worse split or schism is made between the two." Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said, "No person drinks aged wine and immediately wants to drink new wine. New wine is not poured into aged wineskins, for the skins will break, and aged wine is not poured into new wineskins to mix with the new wine, for the wine will spoil." You'll destroy it. "An old patch is not sewn onto a new piece of clothing, for there will be a tear." Now this is overlooked by every Judeo-Christian church in the world. My original Catholic upbringing church, they completely ignore this. Everyone ignores it. And they do teach this. This is a Bible. I'll just go on to this other bit of a screen here. There we are. Holy Bible. Holy Bible. And it's one wineskin. One wineskin, and guess what? 2 wines. 2 wines in the one wineskin. Old wine, new wine. Jesus said, whatever you do, don't put these together in the one wineskin. Whatever you do, don't do that. Don't do that, whatever you do. And look, every Bible in the world, except my Bibles, I cut them in half because they're 2 different religions. Do the same. So, after he warns everyone not to mix the understanding of God, because that's what he's talking about, I'm giving you a new understanding of God. Don't try to mix it in with the old understanding, the two-headed God. It's a different God. They don't match. You'll spoil this understanding. If you try to mix it in with the old war God and loving God, Godhead of the Jews, you're going to destroy the singularity. This is a big warning, and they've all ignored it for 1700 years. So if you look at any Bible in the world, it contains 2 different wines in one wineskin. The Old Wine Testament understanding of the dualistic two-headed God, and the New Wine Testament understanding of the perfect, singular, one true, divine, loving Creator. This is so blatantly obvious and doing exactly what Jesus warned his followers not to do, that it is hard to believe it has been going on for hundreds of years through the corruption of church leaders or sheer ignorance and brainwashing, that only true spiritual children and followers of Jesus can clearly see this now. I'm amazed at how many people are brainwashed into this. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. It's as if they can't think for themselves. Every Christian in the world needs to cut their Bible today into the 2 different religions and keep them apart. Put the old Jewish religion on the shelf, even though it has some of the divine loving Creator in it, because it also has the god of war going by the same name of Yahweh in it. It is dangerous to read without first knowing Jesus. The New and Old Testaments are separate books about different gods and different religions. The old wine is poisoning the new wine and causing serious distortions about the divine loving creator, as Jesus predicted it would if anyone tried to mix them together. Also, the book of Revelation does not belong in the New Testament. It must be removed, as it describes the Old Testament two-headed God as being the same one as the divine loving creator of Jesus. This book slanders both Jesus, the Prince of Peace and Love, and our divine loving spiritual creator. Rip it out and burn it, it's my advice. This is the most cunning and dangerous book in the New Testament for Christians, because after reading the Gospels of Jesus and being guided by him to immerse our spirit and soul in the beautiful teachings he gave us about our divine loving creator, heaven, divine love, forgiveness, compassion, equanimity, and bringing love to all, even our enemies, we can be transformed into true spiritual children of the one divine spiritual creator in the heavenly world. So you read the Gospels and he's leading you through into this beautiful awakening. And then what? But the book of Revelation, which is at the end, destroys your true spiritual identity established through the teachings of Jesus, awakening you to the Spirit by converting you back to being Jewish and worshipping the two-headed dualistic God of love and war of the Jewish religion. War is not love. Your eye is not longer single, seeing only the divine loving spiritual creator of Jesus, and so you are no longer full of light or can be truly called children of the light or true pacifist followers of Jesus. It is just stunning. Jesus gave up his life to try to bring the Jews out of this perverse, delusional understanding of God. They killed him. He gave up his physical body because he knew he had a spiritual body. He knew his spiritual body wouldn't die. But the Jewish Christians have dragged Jesus and all Jewish Christians back into being Jewish. It's unbelievable. I didn't know this was going on because I never bothered about it until I started visiting all these churches. Then I realized what's gone wrong. So I'm happy to talk about it, and I'm happy to support any Christian who doesn't want to be Jewish. Love is all over the place in all religions, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, Jewish religion, the Quran, but singular love, divine love. Jesus and Buddha are pacifists. Look for the pacifist teacher. A pacifist teacher is the ones who are going to be closest to God. It is a well-camouflaged trap. That's the book of Revelations. And devious detour strategically placed at the end of Jesus' teachings by someone to deliberately mislead the followers of Jesus and destroy the singularity of divine love of our divine loving creator. This perverts the full spiritual way of Jesus in you and perverts your true spirit into being dualistic again and both Jewish and Christian, which is just ridiculous. It's a schism. It's schizophrenic. That's why young people just have left. They're not interested in this schizophrenic idea. That is why they are Judeo-Christians and are divided within themselves, worshipping two different gods without even knowing it. Even though it's right in front of their face, the elephant in the room sitting beside them. Christians only follow the one divine loving spiritual creator who gives us true spiritual life that Jesus guides us to become at one with and be her spiritual children of love on earth until we enter the heavenly spiritual world of the divine. Many Judeo-Christians are like a group of children lost and living in a dualistic maze, unable to find the way out. Then Jesus helps them by explaining the way out of the maze by saying, follow me and my spiritual way out of here. But instead of following Jesus out through his spiritual way of divine love, by understanding his words and directions, they say to him, now that we have you here with us, we want you to stay here with us in this dualistic maze. And they never leave it. They remain divided within themselves by still worshipping two different understandings of the divine creator. So they risk not being full of light and becoming true children of light, as Jesus warned. Now that's not to say, my mother was the greatest follower of Jesus I ever met, and she grew up in the Christian Catholic faith, but she was never interested in the Jewish religion of the book of Revelations. She was only interested in Jesus' words. And we had a beautiful relationship. We often talked about it in the last years of her life. And she had what I call intelligent faith. She wasn't fooled by any of the delusional stuff they taught. So the reference he makes using a new garment, not matching the old garment, is also obvious if your eyes and ears are open. So you just don't mix the wine, you'll spoil it, and don't try to put a new patch of a new garment onto an old garment. A person's garment is the outer appearance of their identity within. Clearly, the identity of the Jewish two-headed God does not match the new identity of the divine loving one that Jesus leads us to join and be at one with in spirit and love. This example he gives is also very telling by saying the new divine loving creator is so repulsed by the old two-headed God that the new patch lifts off the old and cannot be joined to it. They are different gods. But Judeo-Christian church leaders around the world are teaching this distorted, corrupt perversion that they are one and the same, which is not the teaching. I repeat, it's not the teaching of Jesus. And I wish the Pope and everyone would just get up, wake up, and cut the Bible in two and lead Christians into the true divine loving pacifist God that Jesus originally established, destroyed by Constantine, and the lies being kept alive by every Judeo-Christian church that I know of in the world. And it's disgraceful. We see another, I get a bit upset at times, we see another very strong reference Jesus makes concerning the old two-headed war god of the Jews that he condemns while rebuking two of his own followers. So you can see it here in his own words, his own disciples they were so indoctrinated that it was difficult for them to understand what he was saying. But here in Luke, chapter 9, 51, 55, Jesus was determined to go to Jerusalem and had to pass through a village of the Samaritans. So Jesus sent two of his followers ahead to make arrangements for them to stay for the night. But the Samaritans were upset that he would not spend some time with them, for they had loved hearing his teachings when he visited with them and the Samaritan woman at the well. So they refused to give him and the disciples accommodation. They were a bit pissed off, He's not staying with us. Oh, we're not going to let him stay then. So when his two disciples, James and John, heard this and went and told Jesus about it, they said, "Teacher, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, just as Elijah did in the Old Testament, the old Jewish two-headed God religion?" But Jesus immediately turned and rebuked them, told them off, saying, "You do not know what sort of spirit you are of and from." You've got no idea who God is. That's what he's saying. You have got no idea who God is. For the child of the divine loving spiritual creator himself does not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. All children of the divine loving one, we don't destroy anyone's life. We save them. We're pacifist Christians. I pray this takes off amongst young people. Just get out of the Old Testament. This is when Elijah in the Old Testament in 2 Kings, he prayed to the violent murdering war god of the Jews to kill those sent to bring him to their king. And fire came down and consumed the captain and the 50 men sent to bring Elijah to the king, making Elijah complicit in their murder. So he already murdered another 50 before that. That's the story, that he called on this war god to send down fire and destroy these people who had come to take him to the king. That's the war god of the Jews. The loving God can't do that because those children that came to get him were children of God as well, as far as the loving God's concerned, whether they know it or not. So we don't kill anyone. Here Jesus states very strongly that even his disciples still did not understand who the true one divine loving creator was, that he was trying to teach them about. They would not leave behind the Old Testament two-headed God of the violent murdering war god and God of love, both called Yahweh, and come to the only divine loving one. His words, "You do not know what sort of spirit you are of and from," is a clear reference to the one true divine loving spiritual creator. For they had not yet awoken to this truth to be born again from above, to become as spiritual children on earth as he was. He must have been very frustrated at times, as this event indicates. If his own followers were finding it difficult to break away from the perverted understanding and indoctrination of the two-headed God, how much more difficult would it be for the Jews who violently defended this war god by killing anyone who blasphemes against it? How many times did they try to stone Jesus to death when he sailed close to the line of openly blaspheming their two-headed God? That's why he spoke in parables a lot of the time. He spoke openly to the disciples secretly. We know that, he said so. But he had to speak in parables because they were always trying to trip him up so they could stone him to death. That's one of the reasons he spoke in parables. But in fact, it's one of the main reasons. The other, because it was an agrarian society, mainly agricultural. So he used things like yeast in the bread, for the spirit in the bread lifts it up, that sort of thing. So he used a lot of common day-to-day things and examples and analogies to talk about the spirit within you. One of my favourites is the spirit, the treasure hidden in the field that a man finds and sells everything to get the treasure. And that's the spiritual life we have within us, and we can let go of our physical body one day. if we've got that spiritual life active and living. One of the most glaring examples of the violent, murdering, thieving war god of the Jews, also called Yahweh, is found in the account of the slaughter of the innocent at Jericho and the theft of their treasures for Yahweh, their war god. Look it up yourself. Joshua 5:12, 6:27. Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, are you for us or for our enemies? Now Jesus said, he who lives by the sword shall perish by the sword. Put your sword back into its place. And here we're saying Joshua sees this vision of someone with a drawn sword sent by some sort of god. Neither, replies this messenger, but as commander of the army of the Lord, the war god, I have now come. Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence to the war god and asked him, what message does my Lord have for his servant? He's happy to worship the war god and do whatever the war god says. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went in and no one came out, no one went in. Understandably, the people of Jericho were frightened of the marauding, murdering Jews. I mean, they barricaded themselves in. They knew what the Jews were up to. Come to murder them, kill them, and steal everything. Then the Lord, the war god, said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men, children of a war god, beasts of the flesh. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests, blowing the trumpets. When you hear them, sound a long blast on the trumpets. Have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up and everyone straight in. They cannot be carrying symbols of the one divine loving creator of Jesus in the Ark of the Covenant, but symbols of their murdering, thieving war god. The divine loving creator of Jesus takes no part in such things and gives no power to them. Only a war god would gladly give power to such evil actions of those who have become murdering, thieving beasts of the flesh. So the Ark of the Covenant, depending on what they wanted, they were putting different gods in it. This is the war god here. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, the war god, and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army, advance, march around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the Ark of the Lord. They march in front of the ark with the weapons of death and not life, for the god of war is death. On the 7th day they got up at daybreak, marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. When someone gives you something as a gift, you do not have to do anything to receive it. Isn't that right? When you give a gift to someone at Christmas, you go, well, here's the gift. Now, what I want you to do is go and slaughter all these people. The city, and I'll give you the gift. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. That's the war god. Only Rahab, the prostitute, and all who are with her in her house shall be spared. We'll let them, we won't kill them, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted ones, keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. So Joshua tells his murdering Jewish army to not steal any of the treasures for themselves, as they all belong to the war god Yahweh, and must be taken back and placed in their war god's temple. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it if you take anything for yourself, pocket it for yourself. In other words, their war god will punish them. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. And that's the war god. Jesus said, you cannot serve mammon and God. My temple, says the divine loving creator, will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of thieves. This is quite a stunning and deadly accurate revelation by Jesus later on, well after this event, because as the gold and silver, etc., they were taking back to honour their war god by placing them in his temple, have all been stolen from the children of Jericho by the thieving Jews. And Jesus understood that that's what they've been doing through their history. marauding, stealing, murdering, putting gold and silver in the temple. That's what he said. This is a place of prayer, not you've made it a den of thieves. He was referring to the Old Testament slaughterings of the war god. He couldn't say it openly because they'd kill him. But that's what he was talking about. Not just the money changes in the temple. He's talking about the Jews who worshipped the war god and brought all these riches back into the temple. That's what he's talking about, really. A few money changes doesn't kill anyone. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men, women, young and old, cattle, sheep and donkeys. They broke through the walls by force, not a magical power, and murdered every single person and even innocent little children of the divine creator and all of their livestock. That's what really happened. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it, but they put the silver and the gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house, the war god. Oh, they kept those, murdered all the children of God, kept the gold. Only a god of war, a beast of the flesh, would consider such material treasures as valuable and something to worship. The divine loving creator only receives gifts of spiritual love that we must create with our precious life, given to us by her while here on earth to honour and thank her. We just give her the gift of loving others. That's the gift we give our God. They murder, kill, slaughter and steal and put gold and stuff in the temple. I mean, can you get any more obvious than this, that it's not the God of Jesus? It's not Jesus. Or can you imagine Jesus there with the sword sticking it through, a baby's heart? I mean, wake up. If you're a Jewish Christian, wake up, hello, I'm trying to wake you up, So the Lord, the violent murdering war god, was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land of men. That'll be right, the land of men, you see, while in heaven his infamy spread. I challenged a number of Christians from different denominations to explain to me how they can believe this God at Jericho is the exact same divine loving creator of Jesus. Here are a few of their answers. Answer number 1. Maybe God had to destroy them all because they were going to interfere with Jesus being born. Now that's a Christian telling me that. A follower of Jesus and the divine loving God of Jesus. Another answer, maybe all those people were evil, so God had to kill them all. Even the little children, innocent children. Third answer, this was the most, I don't know, still not close, but that has always puzzled me, how the God of Jesus could do that, but he must have had a reason. See, refusing, there's no elephant in the room, no, there's no war god, no, that's got no, even though that doesn't sound like Jesus, it doesn't sound like the loving God of Jesus, but it must be because it says so in the Old Testament, and we've been taught that the God in the Old Testament is the same as Jesus, and there it is. The poisonous, disgraceful brainwashing of children on earth by these Judeo-Christian churches. Stop it. Stop doing it. I get a bit upset at times. All of these children were indoctrinated into believing there is only one God in the whole Bible by faulty teachings. Interestingly, all these Judeo-Christians loved studying the Old Testament Jewish religion, the two-headed God of the Jews in the book of Revelations. I found that quite interesting. They really loved the old Jewish religion. In fact, they rarely talked about Jesus' teachings to me. I was talking to them about it all the time, but they'd hardly ever talk about it. They prefer the old wine to the new, and they do not have a full and correct understanding of the divine loving spiritual creator taught by Jesus. They have mixed Jesus and the divine one in with the two-headed God of the Jews and lost the true understanding as Jesus predicted they would if they did that, a very serious and big mistake. I actually attended a Pentecostal church in Melbourne to see how they were delivering the teachings of Jesus from the divine loving creator. The minister was telling the hundreds of people present how we must take the love of God and Jesus out onto the streets of Melbourne and bring them all the word of God. Then, astonishingly, he said, just as the word of God was taken to Jericho by Joshua and the Jews in the Old Testament. I was stunned. I got up and walked out. Needless to say, he did not tell the truth of the slaughter and murder performed by Joshua and the Jews as followers of their brutal war god, who was not the divine loving creator of Jesus. See, this is the poison that I'm referring to. They're poisoning children's minds, these ministers, as priests, nuns, teachers, whoever they are. This is poisonous thinking, poisonous thoughts. It is this insidious poisoning of the true identity of the divine loving Creator that I abhor by spiritual Christian teachers who are actually teaching about the two-headed God of the Jews as being the same divine loving spiritual Creator that Jesus leads us all to be with in her heavenly world. I wish they would stop doing this, but all the Judeo-Christian churches do it. It began with the Emperor Constantine, the Destroyer, in 312 AD, and no one has the moral and spiritual courage today to speak out against it from within the Judeo-Christian organisations that have been built upon this foundation of a lie. I, however, will gladly speak from the rooftops about it to help children find the one true divine loving Creator of their spiritual life. I only have to refer to the words of Jesus himself. It is not just my opinion. Please investigate this for yourself and draw your own conclusions. I always say, you follow your own way. But if you want to read that and tell me that's Jesus there killing and murdering and slaughtering and taking gold and silver back to the temple, and you say you're a follower of Jesus, I say you need to have a break from the Old Testament and go somewhere where there's only people who know about Jesus. Just wake up. Get out of this delusion. There are many other examples in the Old Testament of this brutal, violent, murdering, thieving war god of the Jews that they worshipped along with the God of love, as many still do today, both Jewish and Judeo-Christian. I do not wish to spend more time listing these evil examples, but rather shift to talking about the spiritual way and understanding of the great spiritual teacher, Jesus of Nazareth. There are so many examples of this evil war god in the Old Testament, and yet all Jewish Christian churches say, oh yeah, that's our God, yeah, that's our Christian God. I've never believed that, and I never will. He does acknowledge the divine loving Creator in the old Jewish religion when he teaches from Leviticus supporting the God of love. Jesus understood the God of love was there, but he saw it was a perversion, a perverse God, distorted, perverted, two heads on one body. It's a perversion, it's a monster. So Leviticus 19:17, Jesus taught this. You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbour, lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbour as yourself. It's a little bit inclusive there, or exclusive, I should say. This was still a very limited understanding of divine love, as the Jews tended to only love their own kind. Jesus blows this apart with his parable of the Good Samaritan to open it up to a true divine love for all children of the divine loving Creator. That's a beautiful parable where the Samaritan stops and helps the Jew. But the Jews did have this divine love message later in Leviticus at 19:33-34, which they tend to ignore, where it says, do not take advantage of foreigners who live among you in your land. Treat them like native-born Israelites and love them as you love yourself. This is why Jesus used a Samaritan whom the Jews detested as being inferior to themselves, as being the good neighbour in his parable who stopped to help the dying Jew on the roadside, while two Jews walked past their fellow Jew and did nothing to help him. The Good Samaritan was a true spiritual child of the divine loving Creator, while the two Jews were not, even though they called themselves the chosen people of God. Calling yourself the chosen people of God means nothing. Absolutely nothing. They're just words. If you are the chosen people of the divine loving Creator, then you won't hurt anyone. You'll be a pacifist. The Good Samaritan didn't care that it was a Jew that was hurt and beaten up and left to die. I wish I could find a Good Samaritan for my illness, but never mind. I'm in Melbourne. They've all left Melbourne, the Good Samaritans. Jesus was constantly trying to open up the minds and souls of the Jews to the true one divine loving Creator and release them from the evil grip of the two-headed God of the Jews and awaken them to the divine spiritual love and light. The Godhead of war, violence and revenge, and the Godhead of divine love on one body called Yahweh is a perversion of the true divine spiritual Creator. Wake up. Wake up. You've been asleep a long time, 1700 years. Wake up. Don't follow the two-headed God of the Jews. It's not the God of Jesus. Wake up. I wish all rabbis would delete these references, all these references to this war god from their scriptures as Jesus did. And I wish all the Judeo-Christian churches would stop teaching this misunderstanding disguised as truth. And finally, I encourage every single follower of Jesus and the divine loving Creator to cut your Bible in two and separate out the poison amongst the Old Testament, which Jesus removed, from being allowed to mix and pervert his beautiful spiritual true understanding of our divine loving Creator. Until you cut yourself off from the Jewish religion, you're not going to be free of that poison. I'm telling you now, it's very powerful, very insidious, and it's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. But don't be frightened. God's only love. You'll be truly on Jesus' side and God's side if you cut the Jewish religion out. Cut it out. Put it on the shelf. Study it from time to time, the loving parts. I wish someone would write Jesus and the Good Prophets. I wouldn't mind reading that. Just the aspect, the gold nuggets. Just talk about the gold nuggets. So this is a big problem, and I'm here to try to help children not give up on Jesus, but rather give up on the Jewish religion. Don't believe the God of the Jewish religion is the God of Jesus. Do not believe that. If you're told that, think for yourself. Please. Jesus gave us a very clear and full description of the loving spiritual creator he was at one with as her spiritual child on earth. The main understanding gives is found in John in chapter 4, 23, 24, where he states the following: "The hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers will adore the divine loving spiritual creator in spirit and truth. For such are those who the divine creator seeks to be her children. The divine loving creator is spirit, and those who wish to adore her must come to her in spirit and in truth." Not flesh and truth, in spirit. Jesus said, we are created to be her spiritual children and given true life by the one divine loving spiritual creator. Jesus clearly states that the divine creator of our life is a spiritual being and life force. In John 6:63, he states, "It is the spirit who gives life, the flesh profits nothing." We must become spiritual children to be with her in the heavenly spiritual world, and we must also come to her in truth. The truth about true spiritual identity and the truth about the life we have lived on earth before awakening to our eternal spiritual life. This will be discussed in later chapters if I get there. Jesus also tells us in Mark, only the divine loving spiritual creator is wholly good. Clearly her entire being is truly perfect in both mind and spiritual form, and like gold cannot be tarnished by anything. And she's pure love. Her whole mind is love. And she's a creator though, so she creates spiritual bodies for us to have in heaven. So we can't see them though, you see, you've got to have faith. But once you live out of love, you'll realise you do have this body. He then describes this perfect singular loving mind and nature of the divine loving creator in Matthew and Luke. Now this is the tip of Mount Everest of Jesus' teachings. If you want to understand who the divine loving one is and who you are as her children, spiritual children, and how you have to be, this is it. This is the one verse you need out of all his teachings. You have been wrongly taught of old, you shall love your neighbour and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be spiritual children of our divine loving creator in the heavenly spiritual world. For she causes her sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. She is kind and merciful to the ungrateful and the evil. Therefore, if you wish to be her spiritual children on earth and later in heaven, your love must be as perfect as her love towards all her children. If you only love some but not others, you are not her child. Now there it is. That's it. That's the top of Mount Everest of all his teachings. Everything's beneath that. That's the pinnacle. From the top of Mount Everest, it's high in the sky. Above it is heaven. There's not much between the tip of Mount Everest and heaven. There's no other mountains higher than that. So once you climb up to this perfect love, you are almost in heaven. 1 foot in heaven, 1 foot on earth. It's the Mount Everest of his teachings. Now people say, we can't do that. That's impossible. It's only impossible if you don't believe you have life after death, if you don't believe in heaven, if you don't believe you have a spiritual body, and if you don't believe you can be strong enough in your belief to even let someone murder your body in war, whatever they're doing, the raping, killing, murdering that these satanic children do, and not pick up a gun and kill them. It's only through deep faith that you can be a pacifist. I don't know of any other way. We have to feel sorry for anyone who hurts us. We really do. They only hurt you because they've moved away from heaven and the divine love and the spirit within themselves. They're beasts of the flesh, or what I call shadow figures. So while here on earth, despite being in a physical body of imperfect flesh, we are directed by Jesus to strive in spirit to become at one with her perfect spiritual love and become her true spiritual children on earth. We then manifest this divine heavenly love through our physical actions and words. Jesus said our divine creator knows all things about us. He said in Matthew 6:8 that when we talk with our creator about the needs for our life, she already knows all about them before we even ask her for help. He also states in Luke 12:7, your loving creator even knows the number of hairs on your head. And in Luke 16:15, You are those who justify yourselves in the sight of men, but the divine loving Creator knows the truth of your hearts. For that which is highly esteemed among the worldly children is detestable in the sight of the loving Creator. He further expands on her omniscient mind in Luke 8:17 and Matthew 10:26. Therefore do not fear them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be revealed, or hidden from view that will not be known, or anything secret that will not come to light. We must be aware that heaven can see us all the time, even though we cannot perceive them, for they are fully in spirit, while we still only have eyes of flesh. This is how help can come through prayer, for they can see more than we do, and can create miracles, signs and wonders for us to receive, that we may think are just coincidences, but are not. And there's the power of prayer. See, you think about heaven, and immediately you're moving into spirit. It's a spiritual experience to think about heaven. So you're strengthening your spirit. This is the whole message of Jesus. I wish I could talk about it later, but this is all I've written so far. Jesus explains our divine loving Creator, who is perfect, can only give us loving good things. In Matthew 7:11, if you, even though being imperfect, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your perfectly divine loving Creator in heaven give what is good to all who ask her? Jesus teaches that our divine spiritual Creator never destroys any of her lost children, but only loves them to heaven by lifting them out of the darkness of their own making. In Matthew 18:12, if a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 who are safe on the mountain and go and search for the one that has strayed into danger? And when he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over this lost one being found than over the 99 who never went astray. Likewise it is the will of our divine loving Creator that not even one of these that has gone astray should ever perish or be destroyed. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to reap what you sow. I mean, Vladimir Putin, Hamas, Israeli army, Ukraine army, Russian army, they're all going to reap what they sow after their bodies die, unless they repent, unless they change, unless they become children of love. At the moment, we can only say they're in the dark, and if they die like this, they'll be in the dark, cut off from the divine heavenly world, their own doing. In Luke 15:8, we see the same teaching. If a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one, she lights a lamp and sweeps the house and searches carefully everywhere for it. When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbours, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin I have lost." In the same way, I tell you, there is great joy in the presence of the angels of the loving Creator in heaven over one lost sinner who repents. So all the people who are murdering and killing and who are satanic children at the moment in the wars, they're all satanic children. Any of them can still get to heaven if they change. If they die, or if they get through this war and keep living till old age and they still don't apologise to God for the murder and the slaughter they've caused, they can't get into heaven. It's just that simple. They don't believe in heaven though, so that's why they slaughter and kill. Jesus teaches our divine spiritual Creator can only give us life because her very nature is true eternal life itself. Oh, sorry, I missed a bit here. Again in Luke 12:32, Jesus allays the fears of children by telling them, "Do not be afraid, little flock, about your life on earth, for it is your divine loving Creator's good pleasure to give you all spiritual life in the heavenly spiritual world." See, that's the thing. It's Jesus constantly saying, look, don't worry too much about your physical life. You know, by all means, take care of yourself, your physical body, but you've got another body. Get ready to live in it. The only way you can get ready to live in it is to become the nature of your spiritual body. That's the only way to get ready to live in it, is to make that your primary identity. Then when your body dies, you will find you haven't died at all. Hopefully you'll be in the presence of divine love and be overwhelmed by the love. And if there's nothing blocking you, no sin, no evil between you and the divine one who created your spiritual body, you're not covered yourself in stinking filth. Like all the murderers in the wars at the moment, they're covering themselves in layers and layers and layers of stinking manure. So when they come into the presence of the divine, there's this massive stinking mess between them and the divine loving Creator of their own making. The divine one doesn't hurt anyone. We hurt ourselves. So do not be afraid, little flock, about your life, for it's your divine loving Creator's good pleasure to give you all spiritual life. All the divine loving one and Jesus wants you to do is stop hurting other children, stop sinning, and get ready to leave this dangerous, suffering world and come to a more beautiful world. But you must commit. You've got to commit to spirit, to spiritual life. Oh, I don't want to do that, I'll get hurt or something. Or, oh, they'll kill me or something. Oh, but they're bad people. Okay. Doesn't mean you have to be a bad person. How are they going to know how to get to heaven if you don't show them the way? Lucky we got Jesus. He didn't sort of give up. He said, no, I'll keep showing you the way. Jesus teaches our divine spiritual creator can only give us life, because the very nature is true eternal life itself, and all things we require to have that life come forth from her freely to us if we just wish to accept them. Jesus displays her other qualities through his life on earth by saying, if we understand and know him, we will understand and come to know her. I want to elaborate on that later, but I've been in a lot of pain with this illness. So I'm just trying to put together a few quick words and some beginning chapters. The divine loving creator is in the Old Testament, and any Jew can follow her out of their duality if they wish to, just as Jesus did. It is hard to believe that now Christians have the same problem and must follow Jesus out of the Jewish overlays placed on him and the divine loving creator in the New Testament. I dedicate myself to help others stay with Jesus and get to understand his teachings better, but leave the two-headed God behind and come to the one true divine loving spiritual creator of your spiritual life as Jesus did. So that's my main sort of goal. Two bodies in one on earth. This is the last chapter that I've managed to write. They're fairly rough, but I'm in a lot of pain, so it's all I could do. At least I'll leave it behind as someone may find it who's been thinking about this, but doesn't hear anyone talk about it forthrightly. This is my belief. I'm never going to change this. I've always believed this. So, and Jesus is love and God is love. You know, we shouldn't be Jewish. That's their problem. If they don't come out of it, that's their choice. Jesus became fully aware that he had two different bodies at the same time. One was totally earthly, empowered by earthly foods, water and gases, grows old and dies. One was totally spiritual, empowered only by the loving spiritual life force of our divine loving creator, and never grows old and never dies, but does reap what it sows while here on earth. This was his great achievement and spiritual enlightenment that he received after searching for the one true divine loving spiritual creator and finding her with her blessing and guidance from the heavenly spiritual world. He teaches this to Nicodemus in John 3:3 when he says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of the divine loving creator, and unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter into the heavenly spiritual world. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not be amazed that I said you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and although you hear the sound of it, you do not know where it comes from and where it is going. So are all children who are born of the Spirit." Jesus said, "Let anyone who thirsts come to me and drink. The one believing in me and my teachings, out of them will flow streams of living water. And the one who drinks of the living water that I shall give them shall never thirst again." This is the water Jesus says we need to be born again into our spirit. It is the spiritual life force that lies within all of us, like a wellspring springing up to eternal life, that comes from the divine creator, and Jesus helps us find it within ourselves, uncover it, and teaches us how to become at one with it and keep it flowing in this material dualistic world. This startling and obvious teaching of Jesus about everyone having two very different bodies in one, empowered by different life forces, is found throughout his teachings and his words. We can see this in an often overlooked teaching of Jesus about our spiritual body leaving our physical body at the time of death. Now this is stunning. This is quite obvious what he's saying, and yet I've never heard any Christian church teach this. They don't refer to it. They want everyone to believe your physical body gets raised up from the dirt. That's a complete fabrication, I'm afraid. But it doesn't belittle the truth. You have a spiritual body. You don't need the physical once you've left it behind. So here are Jesus' words, talking about this very thing, that you have two bodies right now. It's very clear. Jesus said, "He who lives an earthly life of the flesh will lose it." Absolutely, everyone does. "But he who loosens himself from his life of flesh by following my way and teachings will find his spiritual life eternal." Very simple, truthful, accurate. Your flesh is going to die. If that's all you're interested in, you're going to lose that life. But if you follow my way and teachings and understand them and wake up, you've got another body. It's spiritual, and that's eternal. And if you become at one with it, you'll be ready to go to heaven. It's life eternal. The flesh is not eternal. But you've got to loosen yourself from the physical flesh, you know. Don't Just live a natural, normal, healthy life. Be like the Amish, just simple life, horse and carts. Fantastic. Conservative hippies. So now he goes on to teach this teaching, that you've got two bodies, and here it is. There will be two bodies in a single bed. One is spiritual, one is flesh. The one of spirit will be taken to be near me. The one of flesh will no longer be of any use, and being redundant will be dismissed. There will be two women grinding at a millstone in the same position. One is spiritual, one is flesh. The one of spirit will be taken to be near me. The one of flesh will no longer be of any use, and being redundant will be dismissed. There will be two standing in a field. One is spiritual, one is flesh. The one of spirit will be taken to be near me. The one of flesh will no longer be of any use, and being redundant will be dismissed. The disciples then asked Jesus, "Where will they be, Lord?" Jesus replied, "The dead body of flesh will be where the vultures gather. The body of the spirit will be where the eagles fly." In the Thomas Gospel, Jesus said, "Two will relax on a couch. One will die, one will live. If the flesh has come into being because of the spirit, it is a wonder. However, if spirit came into being because of the flesh, it's a wonder of wonders. But I am amazed at this, how such great richness of spirit could be placed in such poverty of the flesh. Know what is in the presence of your face and physical body, and what is hidden within you will be revealed and come forth for you to become." Again, it's the treasure hidden in the field saying. You've got a spiritual body inside you. Don't be fooled by the material world. Don't get caught up in being dualistic and love and hate. Certainly don't go around joining armies and kill other children of God, whatever you do. They're all Satan's children. They're being converted into Satanists. We don't want that. We've got to have children of love. So there he is saying quite clearly, two bodies. These extremely important teachings of Jesus clearly show our physical body of flesh dies and does not rise from the earthly grave. It becomes food for the vultures and worms because we have a far more beautiful spiritual form body with us right now, which separates from our body of flesh at the time of death. This is our true spiritual identity with our spiritual form body, soul, mind of love, and soul, which are all created by a divine loving spiritual creator out of love for us to come out of our earthly suffering. They are empowered only by her loving spiritual life force or living waters, and as she is eternal, we also become her eternal spiritual children of love, providing we have awoken to our true spiritual identity. It is not automatic like our body of flesh that grows from the cradle to the grave in a set cycle. We must activate our spiritual life with help from great spiritual teachers like Jesus of Nazareth. And this is part of the thing, you see, it's free will. You've got to choose to be spiritual as well as lead a normal physical life. You have to activate, choose to be spiritual, because you'll be confronted with being greedy or generous, being forgiving or hateful. That's where the spirit's getting tested. Do you want to be spiritual or stay a beast of the flesh? These are testings, these are challenges, these are points of growth, these are opportunities to grow in spirit. That's what they are. That is what they are. In the gardening career I had, one of the things we were taught at college was when you're staking a tree, a sapling, you don't want to stake it too tightly so the wind doesn't do anything, doesn't move it at all, because then when you finally take the support away, the wind will just snap it. The sapling actually has to be pushed by the wind, stressed by the wind for it to grow strong. It's a very simple analogy. We also, as spiritual children, will be tempted, will be challenged. People will hurt us. People will abandon us. People will rob us. We have to, that's the wind, you might say, trying to push us off the rock of the words of Jesus' foundation. That's what we build our house out of, his words, which he gave a beautiful example of. And the stresses are what make us stronger in spirit, providing we move with the spirit, and forgive is one of the most powerful challenges all of us face. So anyway, so there we go. So our true spiritual identity with our spiritual form, body, soul, mind of love and soul, which are all created by a divine loving spiritual creator out of love for us to come out of our earthly suffering. They're empowered only by her loving spiritual life force or living waters. And if she's eternal, then we become eternal spiritual children, which means we don't die. That's what Jesus is talking about when he says we don't die. We become a spiritual child eternally. And but it's something we have to activate. So it is telling that Jesus specifically states that there are two bodies in a single bed. The Greek words are very specific. A body, two in a single bed. Now, a small single bed can only hold one physical person. And there are two women grinding at the millstone, and the Greek words are quite specific, in the sort of same position, sitting in the same seat, you might say. Two are sitting in the same seat, grinding at the millstone. It is important to understand that each house had a small grinding stone to make flour for cooking breads. This stone only had one groove in it, where only one grinding stone could move back and forth to grind the grains. So one woman would have a little grinding stone and a grinder. Two different women couldn't use that same grinding stone. They couldn't use that small one. Two women couldn't do it. Clearly, Jesus is telling us we all have two bodies, but we can only see one. It's as clear as a blue sky. A bit like the blue sky in that photo. The original Greek words in most Bibles regarding these teachings translate the words as one is taken and one remains. But the correct meaning of the Greek word taken should be translated as to receive near to be taken to be near. So one is taken to be near something or someone. The word remains simply means sent forth or dismissed. No, that's dismissed. That one, no, we don't need that. That's dismissed. So one body is dismissed and one is taken to be near. This is not an end of the world apocalypse teaching as some Judeo Christians would have you believe, but it's a simple, enlightened, universal truth that Jesus taught us. A lot of Judeo Christians love this apocalyptic stuff and say, oh, one of these is going to be destroyed and the other person's going to be taken somewhere else to heaven or something, or vice versa. They love this sort of destructing war god, this destroyer of the evil ones. They don't even understand what Jesus is saying at all. He's saying there, you've got two bodies. One's going to die and the vultures are going to get it, and another one's going where the eagles fly, hopefully. Our spiritual body does not die, but our body of flesh does. Our destination after death depends on the divine spiritual law, reaping what we sow. It is neutral and just takes us to where we reap what we have sown, according to how we have lived our life on earth. If we have created suffering, we receive the same suffering. If we have created love, we receive that same love. It's that simple. The divine loving one doesn't hurt you, or you just receive exactly, as Jesus put it this way, whatever you measure out will be measured back to you. It's the Hindu tradition, the Buddhist tradition, all great spiritual teachings. You reap what you sow. That's why we have to be loving. It's too dangerous not to be. You don't want to suffer after you die, that's for sure. It's bad enough dying. Jesus is hopefully saying that all those who spiritually awaken to being at one with divine love during their earthly life will be taken to be near him in the heavenly spiritual world. That's what he's saying. Nicodemus and the Jews had no real understanding about this at all, which is why Nicodemus asked Jesus if we are meant to climb back into our physical mother's womb to be born again. Jesus then replies with some surprise saying, are you a spiritual leader of Israel, but you do not know these things? They didn't understand you had a spiritual body. They couldn't grasp that. The disciples couldn't grasp it. He understood it, and he was trying to teach these dualistic worshippers of a dualistic God about this, and it was extremely difficult. He had a really difficult task. But so Nicodemus didn't understand it either. And he was a leader, of their spiritual tradition. They just didn't get it. Jesus was the one who tried to help them understand this truth. There are a few words missing at the end of these teachings of Jesus in mainstream Bibles after the disciples only ask, where, Lord? So in all the Gospels of the world, it just says, where, Lord? After he says, two at the mill, one taken, one left. Where, Lord? Now, clearly Jesus has already explained where the event happens. So it's not about where, Lord. Where does this happen? It's not about that. Just as we all know, death can strike at any time, in bed, in a field, or just while doing your cooking chores. But the question is not complete. The disciples really want to know, where do they go to, Lord? That's in the Gospels Unplugged. Where do they go to, Lord? These two different bodies. One goes up here and one goes to the vault. One's remained, one taken. They want to know where they both go. We only have the answer for the bodies of dead flesh in all mainstream Gospels. That is, where the dead body is, that's where the vultures will be, the body of flesh. Where the dead body of flesh will be where the vultures gather. All our bodies of flesh become vulture food or worm food, everyone's. However, the words are missing about what happens to this other one that's taken to be near him. So the extra words of Jesus answering, the body of the spirit will be where the eagles fly, makes perfect sense as a contrast to the body of flesh returning to the earth from which it was formed. For the body of the spirit will return to be in the presence of the divine loving spiritual creator in the heavenly world above, who created and formed it for us. So we've got this earthly body that returns to the earth, and we've got this spiritual body that returns to the spiritual creator of our spiritual body. So where the eagles fly is a nice way to term it. It's been left out or cut out deliberately. Vultures only feed on dead things that have no life in them anymore. It's a beautiful analogy. See, our body is the spirit that gives life, the flesh profits nothing. It's all through his words. So vultures gather where the dead flesh body is, and they're going to be there where my body is and your body. It's all worm food. The life, the true life of the body has left. Your true life is your spirit. That's the true life of the body. Well, let's say the ultimate life. The body has its own life too. It's a life force, but it's all physical, material, universal, elements. Spirit's different. So vultures only feed on dead things that have no life in them anymore. Whereas eagles usually feed on living things that still have life in them, which is another nice way to think about it. Eagles feed on living things, living creatures. Vultures feed on dead things that have no life in them. So for your spirit to be where the eagles are, who themselves feed off life, you might say, and our spirit is life, and they soar high in the sky. It's a nice analogy. The analogy works very well, as eagles can soar high above by just extending their wings to ride on the current of air that uplifts their bodies. The word air in Greek can mean spirit. Jesus said, it is the spirit that gives life. The flesh profits nothing. We are lifted up into our true spiritual identity by the Spirit of the Divine, and we will have perfect bodies like angels in the heavenly spiritual world, who are often depicted with wings like eagles. I mean, that's obviously just a common thing that people paint angels with wings, but it's just interesting, that's all, that eagles can just glide up there on the wind currents with their big wings, and angels are often depicted with wings. Mind you, vultures can glide too, some vultures, but they're much heavier sort of bird. They're not as amazing as eagles, I think. Anyway, we must move into and start living out of our spiritual mind and body today, ready to leave at any moment that we may be called out from our body of flesh. Our spiritual identity must become our primary true identity, and our body of flesh is our secondary and complementary temporary body. So that's the thing. You've got to move out of your spiritual body of love and then express it through the physical. Simple analogy I use is water in a vase. Firstly, a simple way to view this is like water in a vase. Two very different substances. One is liquid and one is earth and clay. Our earthly bodies are made of clay, just as earthly vases were and often still are. They eventually break apart through wear and tear over time, just as our bodies of flesh do. And just as vases can take an infinite number of shapes and sizes, so also our physical bodies take an infinite number of distinctive shapes and sizes. The creative power of life is endless in its variations on a theme. Imagine if there was only one type of bird, one type of dog, one type of fish, one type of tree, one type of flower, one type of human. This would be a very boring reduction of an infinite expression of life that makes life so interesting. If we only look at the vase or physicality of others, we see many differences, such as shape, skin colour, language, gender, ethnicity, etc. Now, some children who only see these superficial differences in others use that as a reason not to love them. Us and them becomes their mantra of the flesh identity, and the bricks of their own Berlin Wall of division within themselves. So the us and them become the bricks that build the wall within themselves, preventing love to flow to everyone. Jesus helps bring this Berlin Wall down if we have created one out of our own dualistic minds of the flesh. Their love is divided within themselves, and so they are not full of light or divine love, unlike the spiritual mind of love without walls. When we withhold love from another child, we cannot receive love from the divine because we have blocked its flow into ourselves. once you're not letting love flow out to others, it's hard for the divine to put love into you, you know. You're blocking it yourself, blocking the flow. It's not the divine withholding it, we block it. Love your neighbour as yourself. Love is a living, flowing water constantly refreshing us as we share it with other children. As Jesus said, with what measure you give, it will be given to you. Spirit is like water. If we take a clean glass bowl filled with pristine pure water, we can pour that same water into every single different vase, shape and size, and it will take the form of every vase perfectly. So it is with our spiritual body and soul within us all. They fit perfectly into everyone, overlapping our physical body of flesh and earth, but are not of the earth and cannot be seen with human eyes of flesh. While clay vases can be made of a variety of earthly elements, our spiritual form body and soul can only be made from the loving life force of the divine loving spiritual creator. And all our spiritual minds are singular and only empowered by love. It is the dualistic mind of the flesh that can cause serious and dangerous distortions if we are not spiritually awake. As our spirits are all made of the same spiritual substance from our divine loving spiritual creator, we are all equally precious children of the divine loving creator, regardless of what the outer vase looks like. We really are brothers and sisters of Jesus if we awaken to the spirit. The water in the vase is our true spiritual identity, conceived from love for us by the loving creator. When a vase breaks after spilling the water it held, it slowly evaporates out of sight. As Jesus said to Nicodemus, the wind blows where it wills, and you hear the sound of it, but you do not know where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit. We never see spirits leave bodies, or very rarely. Some nurses might report it in nursing homes and hospitals. There's a light in the room and suddenly the person's gone. They've died and the body's dead, but there was some sort of glow. Other than that, it's rare. That's the way it has to be. For some reason, we have to become spiritual to actually have any real connection with heaven. And we become spiritual by following the loving way of someone like Jesus, or Buddha's good too. The ideal for followers of the spiritual way of Jesus is to awaken to our inner true spiritual identity and soul mind of love, and then express that through our vase or physical body of flesh while we still have time to do so. This will consolidate our true spiritual life and identity in preparation for us to enter the heavenly spiritual world beyond all suffering. Now, another simple analogy I have is spiritual riders on an earthly horse. Oh, pardon me. Another simple analogy is that we are all spiritual riders on an earthly horse. I am not the horse and the horse is not me, but we need each other in this material earthly world. As the rider, I should be holding the reins. I have to feed my earthly companion with healthy foods and care for him or her in the best possible way. I should never cause my horse any harm through putting harmful substances in him or her, or doing foolish, dangerous things that may injure my horse. I have a simple responsibility to care for all my horse's needs in a natural, healthy way. If my horse is healthy, I'm in a position to bring love to other children and share in a loving life. I need my physical companion to be able to express my inner spirit of love to others and to reach out and help them. He becomes the material manifestation through which the spiritual loving life force placed in my spirit and soul from the divine loving creator is made available to other children in need. He would be like a vase of crystal instead of clay, through which my inner spiritual love can shine out to others. But if there is no light in me, he is only clay. I always think of like my body and my spiritual body are one in purpose. We're at one in purpose. Like two circles overlapping as one circle. Instead of two eyes, there's one eye, as Jesus would say. My body, my physical body, I only want my physical body to try to bring this divine love that's in my spiritual body to everyone I meet. So we're at one in purpose. But I'm not the physical body, and the physical body is not my spiritual body, but we're at one in purpose, and we can be at one. Ill health is a problem, sickness is a big problem, and pain, but I won't talk in detail about that. There are many things that can interfere with that oneness, but that's the goal. Your spiritual body is primary, your spiritual mind is love, and your physical body is the secondary body that then expresses it for a little while. So, Jesus had a perfect spiritual body after his body of flesh died and was buried. He had no wounds in his perfect spiritual body form. The gospel accounts stating that he did have a physical body with wounds were placed in to cover up that his body of flesh died and decayed. I won't talk about that here, but that's really what happened. He appeared in his spiritual body. The classic sort of clue to it is when he appears to Mary Magdalene at the tomb, and Mary doesn't recognise him. None of them do when he's in his spiritual body. They're not sure, is that Jesus? We're not sure. It's a strange looking person. Yeah, it looks like Jesus, because he's in a spiritual body now. And Mary goes to hug him when she realises, oh, teacher. She realises it's, he thinks it's the gardener, doesn't recognise him. He says, Mary, it's me, sort of thing. And then he says, oh, don't try to hold me, Mary. Don't try to hug me. You won't be able to. I'm in a spiritual body now. You're still in a body of flesh. You won't be able to hug me. He's in a different body with Mary Magdalene at the tomb. She's in a body of blood and bones and flesh. He's in a spiritual body. She can't hug him. That's one of the biggest clues in the Gospels, that he never rose in his physical body at all. My opinion is that John and Peter hid the body, and they had to. He appeared to them, all the 11 disciples. Thomas was there as well. It's written in one of the Gospels that all the 11 were there when he appeared in the room, probably Friday night. And he only briefly appeared and said, why are you all troubled? It's me. Receive the Holy Spirit and teach what I've taught you to others. And he disappears. Very brief, very brief. And what was put in, though, was to cover up the fact that they had to hide his body for a simple reason. If they said, we saw Jesus, he appeared to us, he spoke to us, he was in this extraordinarily healthy looking body, very unusual spiritual looking body, but it was him and he spoke to us and he was alive. The Jewish leaders would only have to go to his tomb, find out where his tomb is, go there, open it up and find his dead physical body. And then they'd simply say, you're all liars. All these followers are liars. They'd tell everyone in Jerusalem, Jesus' body's dead in the tomb. You can go and look at it yourself if you want to. They're saying they saw him, they spoke to him, and that would have destroyed his message, his teachings from being passed on 2,000 years later to here in Melbourne, Australia, where I've heard them. They would have been destroyed. The apostles would have been called frauds and liars, and it would have died out. So I think Peter and John did what they thought was best at the time. They hid his body somewhere else, in another tomb, wherever. Didn't tell anyone. Then they said, well, his body's not in the tomb anymore. The thing they had to deal with was they really did see him, but he was in a spiritual body. He really did speak to them, and he was alive, but it was all spiritual. And just as we saw earlier, that his 2 disciples still didn't get it, who God was. Nicodemus didn't understand born again in spirit. The Jews weren't ready for this information. It's taken time for that to come through fully, for children to understand. They just weren't ready to think you had a spiritual body that doesn't die with you right now. So the disciples themselves were still only trying to grapple with this new understanding. For them it was all new as well. So I think John and Peter did something with good intention. And then, of course, you've got this stuff in the Gospel of John. It's only in John, the doubting Thomas stuff. That was put in there to disparage the Gospel of Thomas. That's for sure. And you don't see that anywhere else, this doubting Thomas business. And Thomas and his wounds and this sort of business. That's a real deliberate attempt to make out Jesus had a physical body, eating fish and honey. When you're in a spiritual body, my understanding is you don't need toilet paper anymore. That's my opinion. That's my understanding if you've got a body like an angel. So, Jesus just appears in a room and just disappears. He's in a different dimension, a different body, a different substance, a different life force, a different energy, all these different terminologies. It's not physical anymore, and he keeps saying it all through his teachings. Flesh gives birth to flesh, spirit gives birth to spirit. You've got to be born again. We've got to have faith. And so that's sort of where it is anyway. So I think John and Peter did that for good intention, and then it became, all bodies are going to be lifted up out of the grave again. That's a complete, it's not even necessary to think about that at all, because preparing your spirit and soul to be in the presence of the divine creator is all that really matters. And you can only do that if you're spiritual. And you can only do that if you understand what it means to be spiritual. And you can only do that if you understand what Jesus' words are saying. His death on the cross and his blood on the cross won't save you. His death on the cross was his final teaching. I'll show you, when the body dies, it's dead. And I'll appear to you, disciples, in another body. You'll see me again. He told them this. So you won't see me for a little while, then I'll appear to you again, then I'll be gone again. He told them. He knew he had a spiritual body. He knew once they killed his physical body, the disciples would see him again, but in his spiritual body. They weren't ready for all of that. You can see it right through the teachings. They had trouble grasping this. Jesus understood it. He was blessed. He was truly advanced spiritually. But he did it. He went ahead and let them kill his physical body. And then he appeared to them in his spiritual body, which was perfect. A spiritual body doesn't have wounds in it. Doesn't make any sense at all. So physical bodies have wounds, not spiritual. So that's the understanding that I have. And I'm happy to share that with you. Now, you're more than happy to say that's a load of rubbish. I don't mind. In fact, I'd be happy if anyone was to, contact me, say you're a load of rubbish and email me, because at least I'll have someone to talk to about this and find out why they believe the two-headed God of the Jews is the same God as Jesus. Because, of course, everyone's reluctant to talk about Jericho. I mean, that's the worst example, one of the worst. There are even worse ones than those, but that's the classic. Now, the elephant in the room is that the Jews worshipped a two-headed God on one body called Yahweh. That's the elephant in the room. All Judeo-Christian churches, Catholic, Church of England, Jehovah's, Seventh-day, everyone is teaching this lie. To be polite, you might say it's a misunderstanding, but in fact, it's clearly and obviously a delusional distortion, perversion. Jesus died to bring children out of the dualistic two-headed God. He gave up his body to bring them out into the singularity of divine love. And then 300 years later, Constantine and the corrupt church leaders took everyone back to be Jewish and worship the two-headed God again, and they've never stopped. I'm in Melbourne, Australia. There is not one Christian church in Melbourne, Australia that I know of. Not one. They're all Jewish Christian churches. I can't join them, as in fully join them. I can go along and hear a sermon, whatever, but I don't believe what they teach about the Jewish religion, God being not my understanding of Jesus and God. It's not my understanding, so I can't join them. Think for yourselves. Read the book yourselves. Read the New Testament yourselves. Rip out the book of Revelation and burn it. Start a barbecue with it. It's the only good thing it's useful for. However, many people study it. Okay. Jesus said, my words, they are spirit and they are life. He who understands my words hears them, listens to them, and understands them. He'll be like a man who built a house on a rock. And the winds came and the rains beat against it in this world, and nothing could overcome that house because it was built on the rock of my words. But a man who builds a house not on my words, not on my understanding about you have a spiritual life, is like a person who builds a house on sand. And the winds and the storms come and the rains, and that house collapses. As all flesh houses do. It's a house of flesh he's talking about. The spiritual house is eternal. I'm not saying it's easy to be spiritual. I'm being poisoned to death by a fungal infection in my body. 20 specialists in Melbourne have refused to treat me. They've withheld treatment, and they've even stopped people from treating me and threatened people who are trying to help me because I've got so much evidence that they're incompetent and negligent. I don't want to sue them. I'm just providing them with more and more evidence, and then they realise, oh, we're incompetent, we're negligent. Don't help this guy. Let him die. So there's a big problem right through all of our societies now where this insidious sort of evil can creep in, and instead of being filled with love and care for another, and I mean doctors of all people, I have to say I've never met people who cared less about me than the 19 out of the 20 specialists I saw. I've never met a group of people who cared less about me, and they're doctors. So this is a really serious problem, certainly in Melbourne, and the medical profession has really got some really serious dark things going on in it here in Melbourne, which I discovered. That's why I pray for them first, those who refuse to help me stay alive in the flesh. Oh boy, forgiveness. What a wonderful lesson. I must write a letter to thank them. You've deepened my faith in God, because you sure wouldn't help me. I must write a letter to them. Okay then. As always, follow your own way to heaven. My way is just my way. But it's based on Jesus' words, and they're pretty clear. You only have to read them. But whatever you do, cut the chains that are binding you down to the Jewish religion. Christians are not Jews. Jewish people don't study the Gospels. Children of the followers of Jesus don't need to study the Old Testament. You don't need to study it at all. Not at all. However, there is some love in there, but it's a dangerous book. And because everyone's being poisoned, perverted by these Christian teachers in all these Judeo-Christian churches around the world, that's the one God in the whole Bible. Young people are just leaving the Christian religion in droves. They just see it as just a crackpot religion. How can you say this God's going to destroy everyone, throw him into hell? But Jesus is love, and the God of Jesus forgives. Understandably. I'd love to start a new Christian church in Melbourne, which is just for Christians. I mean, anyone, that is to say, who's love and non-violence. You could be a Buddhist, you could be a Jew, Muslim. As long as your love and non-violence is the understanding of the divine presence, you could join that church and bring with you your own sort of religious, scriptures and things, but providing the only love and non-violence. Any violent God, not allowed in the door. Sorry, you'll have to go and join that dualistic two-headed God church over the road there. We only talk about love here and the divine loving presence of heaven, nothing else. I'm sorry, war gods are not that welcome. But, of course, I'm in a minority, very small. Well, as I say, I'm in a lot of pain writing this initial book, and I can't write it very well because of the agony I'm in. The brain, of course, is being poisoned by the neurotoxins. That's the infection in the lung there, which they refuse to treat me for. So that's okay. It's deadly. Okay. Poisons you to death. Not a nice experience. Nearly died. I've lost track how many times I've nearly died here at home now. Anyway, as I say, I died to the flesh. So I've been sustained through my battle of being really persecuted and withheld treatment and all the rest of it by these people, and colluded against. People who wanted to help me blocked from helping me, people threatened who were helping me. I've come through all of this and abandoned too. Friends have abandoned me, a lot of friends. I don't believe I'm ill, this sort of thing. So I've realised that in the end we have to rely totally on this divine loving presence of the divine loving one who gives us our spiritual life, because that's the real life anyway. And that's what sustained me, is my belief in this divine loving being who's spiritual, through Jesus of Nazareth, who's only a pacifist, divine love, non-violent spiritual teacher. So through his words, he leads me to the divine loving one, and that's sustained me. For years I've been fighting this infection, and that's been my main support. Otherwise I would have died a long time ago. So one book's out there and published, where are we now? Have we got it here? There we are. That's the teachings. That's not published yet. I don't know if I'll live long enough to complete that. And I have to do justice. I mean, I have to be well to write, beautiful things about Jesus' teachings. But that one's available around the world, The Gospels of Jesus Unplugged. And you can get that all over the place on the internet. So, I'll leave you with that. I wanted to get these 3 chapters out because every day now I nearly die, and I have to go and spend time in my fruiterer's. My fruiterer is a friend. I have a friend who's a fruiterer, and they have a huge fridge systems, and within their 3 to 5 degrees fridge, which is big enough for forklifts to drive into, they have another freezer fridge at minus 20 degrees. And I have to go and stand in that freezer every afternoon now for the last 3 months in order not to die each day. And I nearly die every day, and I nearly can't even drive there now. But he's a fruiterer, and he's helping to save my life or extend it. The medical profession in Melbourne won't lift a finger. And that just shows you God's love, with all their university degrees on the wall, they had no love for me at all. They even laughed at me, ridiculed me and sent me broke. But my friend who's a fruiterer, a simple fruiterer, he loves me. Yeah, he uses our freezer. He knows about the corruption in the medical profession here in Melbourne. He knows about it. And he loves me. Yeah, come every day. Yeah, go in there as long as you want. He does everything he can. Simple love. Simple person, simple friend. And supports me. Don't give up, you know. A couple of people worked it. Oh, don't keep coming. Don't give up. Because I nearly can't get there anymore. It's nearly killing me every day now, the poison. But they encourage me, whereas I don't get encouragement from old friends. That's life, though, isn't it? That's life. Everyone's busy. Everyone's busy. Haven't got any time. Too busy. Okay, I understand. We all have a journey to travel on, etc., etc. I pray that all the satanic children in the armies killing each other, Satan's sitting back and laughing his head off at you all the countries who are giving them bombs and guns to kill more children, you're all satanic. I say that because you worship death, murder and slaughter, and you are against the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, so you're against the divine loving creator who gives you your spiritual life. So therefore you're satanic. You're the opposite of the divine loving children of the divine loving one on earth. That's all I can say is just, I'm sorry that you've gone into the darkness. It's really horrible to see you do that. Kill each other. Oh well. Be love in your little part of the jigsaw of the world, and at least your little part will be love, and you'll be safe. And when your body dies, and it will, your physical body, hopefully you've been spiritual long enough and been tested enough times to stay in spiritual love that when your body does stop, when this piece of meat in the middle here stops moving, called the heart, once that piece of meat stops moving, then you'll be separated. You know, it'll be like, it's like that. You know, it's a bit like that. It's another nice analogy. You think there's one hand there, but at death, you realise there were two bodies there all along. You just didn't realise it. But Jesus understood, and that's why he's trying to tell us, look, you've got another body. Get into that one. Don't hurt anyone, and love everybody. Don't be greedy and all the rest of it. So he's the way to heaven for sure. Buddha would have to be the second best spiritual teacher I know of. But there's love in the Jewish religion, in the Sikh religion, in the Quran. It's all over the place, but there's only bits and pieces, and it's not necessarily divine love. That is, you know, you've got to be a pacifist to be a true child of the divine in heaven. So Jesus and Buddha, they're the two main pacifist teachers I know of. And both, interestingly, Buddha, of course, taught you've got to clean the mind out of all the problems. That's where the problems are in your mind, Buddha said, in order to have what he called the clear light experience of the mind. Jesus, interestingly, says that it's not the dirt on the outside of the body that's the problem, it's the filth inside the cup. You've got to clean the inside of the cup out, make that clean. It's the exact same teaching as Buddha. And then, of course, automatically your actions will be good. If you're good spiritually and kind, all your actions will follow. Kind and good and love, as Buddha taught. So you've got to clean the inside out in order to clean your spirit. Then love from God, the divine loving source, can flow into you and out to others. And Jesus is a great teacher about that, and Buddha also about cleaning the mind. Buddha was sort of like passive love, become at one with this beautiful passive love experience. Jesus said, yeah, do that, become at one with this passive love spiritual identity, but then reach out to all those who have fallen down in the world and help lift them up. So rather than passive love, Jesus was love in action. So, and I remember the Dalai Lama at one of his lectures here years ago in Australia. He said this country, after the Aboriginal people, became a Judeo-Christian country predominantly. And he said, we Buddhists should learn from our Christian brothers and sisters because They have a history, long history of building schools, building hospitals, providing homes and shelters and charity work. They're out there on the streets helping homeless people. We Buddhists should learn from our Christian brothers and sisters. See, the Dalai Lama realized the Buddha has the clean mind, as Jesus had the clean mind, but Jesus went further and said, you become selfless by in fact serving others. Buddha said you become selfless by removing sort of the ego mind. Jesus said, yeah, do that, sure. But then let love flow to others. So it's a beautiful 600 years apart, but I'm sure they would have had a great conversation if they met at the same time. I better go. This has been a very long video and I doubt anyone will watch it. But I had to put it on because I could die tonight or tomorrow. And it's all I've got that I've been able to do. It's been really hard for me to get the second book underway. And I almost can't do any work anymore on it. So it's a bit rough and the words are a bit sort of unrefined. But I hope the general concepts, particularly for Christian children who are entangled in the poison of the Old Testament religion of the two-headed God of the Jews, and it is a two-headed God. I mean, get over it. Wake up. Well, you know, the elephant's in the room right in front of you. They don't worship the God of Jesus. They never worship one God. They've always worshipped two gods with one body. That's the cunning sort of aspect of it. At least the Romans were honest. They'd go to the war god of Mars temple and slaughter an animal and offer it to the war god, then go and kill some people. Whereas the Jews had this cunning idea, we'll make the god of love and the god of war on the one body. That way we can sort of do both at the same time. Sorry. The divine loving God knows what you're up to. And Judeo-Christians should never go to war. Simple as that. Follow the Quakers and the Amish, people like that. They're the leaders. They're the Christian leaders in the world. I pray you reach heaven after your physical body dies. Hope I do too.